and gave them power and authority over all demons to cure diseases. So Jesus calls his 12 disciples together, and he gave them power. Notice this is specifically to them at this point in time, where he is giving them power over the demons and to cure diseases. So remember, we have Luke. Luke is a physician. We've mentioned that multiple times. And here we see the physician talking about a cure that's beyond the normal doctor's power and control, something that these 12 are getting outside the normal realm of power. He sent them to preach the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. He sent them out with a purpose, to preach the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. So Jesus says, take nothing for your journey, neither staff, nor bag, nor bead, nor money, and do not have 2 tunics apiece. Whatever house you enter, stay there, and from there depart. So when Jesus is sending out the 12 disciples, he sent them out, and what are the supplies that they're to take with them? How are they to take care of themselves? Well, are they on their own? They have power. Jesus gives them a miraculous amount of power. So, how they take care of themselves? Do what? The hospitality of the people they live with. That's right. Yep. So, take nothing for the journey, neither staff, nor bag, nor bread, nor money. And do not have 2 tunics apiece. What's the 2 tunics apiece? Don't take a change of clothes. Just take what you got. Why is it worded this way? Why is Jesus sending them out this way? So they can move fast. This is an important mission. This is an important mission. Their trust, their reliance is on God. God's going to make sure they're fed. Yes, they're going into people's homes. The people will be there to take care of them. God's going to have all that arranged. God is working through Jesus Christ. He's working through these 12s. There's an important message, and they need to move fast.
Now, excluded him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How can he expect them to present the message in a believable, right way if they don't believe themselves? If they're not,
They have to have faith.
They got to have faith. So their faith has got to be working.
Yeah. They're literally stepping out on faith in the power of God here. Verse 5. Now, I want to spend just a minute of time here. If I were to open up a preaching school, or if I were to open up anything that was training people to go out into the world and spread the gospel, I honestly think I would start with this verse. I think it is one of the most important verses when it comes to spreading the gospel that's out there. I think it's very important for Christians to understand this verse. Let's look at it. So Jesus sends out the 12. He gives them power. He tells them not to take any change of clothes. Don't take money. Don't take food. Just go. And he also tells them, whoever will not receive you, when you go out of that city, shake off the very dust from your feet as a testimony against them. Shake off the very dust of your feet. Why is that so important? As a Christian, why is this passage important to us today? Why?
A little bit goes back to, we hope you sow your seed on fertile ground.
Yeah.
You think it's not fertile, move on to fertile.
Yeah. Which direction should we be going as Christians? Forward. Always moving forward. Right?
You can't dwell on what happened.
That's exactly right. You cannot dwell on the past. You can't dwell on that. You can't dwell on that. There's a lot of times as when we go out and we talk to people as Christians and we try to get them to obey the gospel and they don't want to hear it, or they make light of it even, or they just don't listen, or they hear you and they know the truth but they don't obey. And you can get caught up on that so that you spend all of your energy trying to focus and change one person or one city in this case, or one town. You get so caught up on that one thing that you miss everything else. You know, it's like a funny story, and I never really thought of this before, but I used to fish all the time. I used to just love to fish. I mean, it was all the time I was fishing. And there was this one fish that I wanted to catch. And I remember it because I could see it. It was this huge largemouth bass, and it lived under this bush at this one place, and I would go and I would spend an hour trying to catch this one fish. There was a lot of other fish that I never caught that day because I was spending time with that one fish. There might have been a bigger fish, but I couldn't get past catching this one that I could see. I never did catch that stupid thing. But anyway, I hope it's choked on a frog. But so, the thing is, if we focus our attention and we can't shake off the dust for our feet, we can lose souls. Because there are people that are willing to hear. There are people that are willing to obey. And it's hard for us to move forward unless we shake the dust off our feet. The other side of that coin is, as a Christian, we have to keep the confidence of Christ. We have to keep the joy of Christ in us all the time. And if we continually focus on the failures of life, then we get down, we get discouraged, and we don't continue sowing seed. And we can't do that. We can't do that as Christians.
Sometimes I think we can get so invested on catching that one fish that we forget they're not rejecting us. Like
That's right.
God said in the Old Testament, they're rejecting me. And it breaks our heart because we get invested in catching that one fish and we just grieve over it. And
We do.
question whether we did something wrong in delivering the message, or what could I do different, God? How could I get this person?
We do.
And they're rejecting us.
We get invested in one fish. We get invested. We put time, we put effort, we put prayer, we do all these things. We do all of these things. The thing we have to remember is it isn't about we. It isn't about us. It isn't about I. It's about God. If they reject the Word, they're not rejecting me. They're rejecting God. We have to remember that. And it's about God. It's about Christ. It's about lost souls. And it's so hard. And I can easily remember in my mind when I was at McCoynesville, I can remember this one person and trying to get that person to obey, and they were so close, and they died before they just refused to obey. They kept saying, I will, put it off, And it's hard to shake that off. But if you stopped there, what good does it do? And it's so hard. It's hard. But it's one of the most important things Jesus teaches.
We have to understand too, though, that they made every effort when they were in the city. They didn't
Yes,
just
they
go in there and just go. I mean, they made every effort. They tried.
Yes, they did.
And I think that's the one thing we have to understand.
And in these 12, Jesus had given them miraculous power to cast out demons and to heal the sick. So if people didn't listen to that power, they really didn't want to hear. But you got it right.
And when you plant a seed, it don't just jump about.
That's exactly right. It may come up a year later.
I work with somebody that's kind of like that, and he's an elder told me he's aware of it. This congregation, don't give up on so-and-so.
Mm-hmm.
That don't mean, if one don't, that don't mean others won't turn the corner.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Mike raises a real good point. I was thinking about that before he said that. If you dwell on the handful of seed that you sowed and you sit there and wait till they come up, look how many acres you could sow seed in.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm speaking spiritually here in the people.
Yeah.
But I think Mike raises, don't wait for the seed necessarily to come up, because you sowed it. It may be another generation before it blooms out in that seed.
That's right. That's exactly right.
There's an old sales pitch. It's basically called, you don't use a rifle to get a sale.
Yeah.
Use a shotgun.
Yeah.
Because you want that. Because you're going to pluck several out of the shotgun. If you just sit here and bang that one, you're going to lose.
You lose everything else. Yeah.
I heard a minister say, as I was coming down here this morning, pulling the door, he said, even though Paul and Silas were doing the will of God, they were treated unfairly and mistreated.
Yeah. They were.
And I think that's the reason he tells us in verse 8 about sowing the seed and stuff right before this,
Yeah.
during chapter.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. Exactly right. So they departed. You know, those three words right there is pretty important. So they departed. That's one thing that as Christians we have to learn to do. Jesus said, go into all the world. We can't do anything until we go. We have to go. And they departed, they went through the towns preaching the gospel and healing everywhere. Now Herod the Tetrarch heard of all that was done by him, and he was perplexed, because it was said by some that John had risen from the dead, and by some that Elijah had appeared, and by others that one of the old prophets had risen again. Herod said, John I have beheaded, but who is this of whom I hear such things? So he sought to see him. You know, when I read this, you know, you think about Herod, and we know how he, you know, had John the Baptist beheaded and all that, and head on a silver platter. And you think about this for a second, in his perplexions, if you will. But do you think Herod was getting concerned? What if John the Baptist is raised from the dead? What if the prophets are come? Why was Herod so upset here? Why was Herod so upset? Do you think he was concerned and worried and scared a little bit? I do. Huh? Yeah. Yeah. Well, two things. Number one, he was afraid he'd lose his power. He didn't want to lose his earthly position. He didn't want to lose his earthly power. And then the other side, if somebody could be raised from the dead that he had killed, that really put him in a bad position. You know, and if it was God's prophet that he killed, and which it was, and if it, you know, and God is sending people after him, so he was in a very scary position. You know, he didn't want to lose his earthly power, but then there's the other side of this too, where he might have realized that God was after him a little bit.
I think he's like so many back then. They heard, but they didn't want to believe, because of exactly what you said, because of his power, his position, and what's going on. So he didn't want to believe, but he heard, so he had that doubt, he had that wonder.
Yeah.
Just like
Yeah. Yeah. You almost persuaded me to agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the apostles, when they had returned, told him all that they had done. Then he took them and went aside privately into a deserted place belonging to the city that is called Bethsaida. So let me ask you a question. Jesus, and this is, if I was, I said the first thing I would do if I was having a preaching school or teaching somebody to go into the world is, number one, is teach them to shake the dust off their feet. That's the number one thing, be able to move forward. The second thing is to teach them that they need time to recharge. They need time alone. Now, we have just looked at this where Jesus Christ, the Son of God, had given these 12 men an extra amount of power where they could go out and heal the sick. They could go out and do miraculous things, right? Why does Jesus take them to a place to try to be alone? How many times in Scripture do you see where Jesus gets off by himself and prays? Why is that necessary? Why is that important to teach someone if they're spreading the gospel of Christ, that they need a chance to recharge? Is it easy to burn out? Very. Is it easy to get tired and worn out?
Sometimes you can get so bogged down with the work itself, you forget why you're doing what
That's
you're doing.
exactly right. It's easy to get bogged down with the work itself. You forget why you're doing what you're doing. Christians need time alone in prayer with God. They need time alone. They need a chance to recharge. He took them out and went aside privately into a deserted place. But when the multitudes knew it, they followed him. And he received them and spoke to them about the kingdom of God and healed those who had need of healing. Wouldn't this been an amazing time where people were trying to get to Jesus? I mean, Jesus trying to go off by himself, with his disciples and recharge, and the multitude just follows. I mean, wouldn't that have been exciting to see people that excited trying to find Jesus? When the day began to wear away, the 12 came and said to him, "Send the multitude away, that they may go into the surrounding towns and country and lodge and get provisions, for we are in a deserted place here." Oh, there's about 1 million sermons in this verse. Why did the disciples of Christ, what had they been given power to do? They had been given power to go out and do what? To preach the kingdom. Multitudes are coming to them. Jesus said, you go out into the city, you don't take clothes, you don't take money, you just don't take food, you just go. Well, here they are in a deserted place and everybody's coming to them. The sun is setting low, the day's almost over. They're getting tired, they're getting weary. They say to Jesus, "Send them away." Oh, would we do that? Would we do that? The human side of us would do that all day long, wouldn't we? Tired.
Lost the amazement of what was going on. I mean, they were already forgotten people were being healed, and all that. And they were just like, "Oh, it's just no delay."
The day's done. Let's get some rest.
Yeah.
Everybody needs some food. But I want you to notice something here. They're doing it with great intention. There's nothing around here for them to eat. There's nowhere around here for them to sleep. We need to take care of them. Send them away to where they can go get taken care of. Would we do that as Christians? Have the best intentions in the world and send people away from Christ. There's about 1 million sermons right here. How could we do that? How could you and I send people away, turn people away from Christ, worrying about the physical? I want you to look at this for a second. These 12 disciples, who had been given miraculous power, by the way, these 12 were focused on physical hunger and physical needs. Let's turn them away so they can get fed physically. What were they missing? Jesus wanted to fill them spiritually as well as physically.
Jerry, I think Satan uses those things that we worry about too to distract us from
Absolutely.
the purpose God has for us.
Yes.
And it kind of makes me think about COVID because, as a church, we took precautions, which is not a bad thing, but I think Satan used that.
Absolutely.
It's hurt the church.
These were 12 men. They're no different than we are. They had to grow and mature and learn.
Yes,
They were just men. And that's what you do. You send them away to get something to eat, a place to sleep. They didn't get it all exactly into.
That's right.
They're just like us.
That's exactly right.
Just because they were given powers to heal and teach, they were still men like us.
Yeah. They were. They were human. Would we ever do this? Intentionally, no. Intentionally, no, we wouldn't push anybody away from Christ. How could we do this today? Huh? Having a bad attitude push people away from Christ? Yep. Yeah. Exactly right. There's a lot of ways that we could turn someone away from Christ and not even mean to. This is a scary passage, actually. Very scary. But he said to them, "You give them something to eat." Don't send them away. You give them something to eat. Now, the 12 disciples were getting a little worried here. They're going, "Well, what are we going to do? We don't." Well, first of all, you send us out. Remember, how did Jesus send them out? They didn't take any money with them. They didn't take any food with them. They didn't even take a change of clothes with them. So they're sitting here, and Jesus says to them, "You feed them something." Well, how? Wouldn't that be us? Isn't that us today? When we're opened a door, it maybe is open for us to reach out to the lost in the world, and we go, how are we going to do it? It's not possible. Yeah, exactly right. Where's the faith? They were men.
You
They had to
gave
learn.
them power over demons and diseases.
Mhm.
They didn't realize probably how much power he had gave them.
Neither do we.
Right.
That's exactly right. They did not realize how much power they had been given, and neither do we. Neither do we. That's exactly right.
Something else that I find interesting. We talked about it before. Jesus is always fed them,
Yes.
physically and spiritually.
Yes.
I've often wondered, you know, he fed such a large crowd with such a small amount. Maybe it's because their physical hunger wasn't that great, their spiritual hunger was.
Yeah. May very well be. Look at what they said. And put yourself in this. Make this very personal. Put yourself here. I can see myself saying the same thing. How? How are we going to feed them? We have no more than 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish unless we go and buy food for all these people. But you sent us out without any money anyway. It's interesting that he sent them out without any food and money, then all of a sudden they have 5 loaves and 2 fishes. For there were about 5,000 men. Was it only men there? You ever thought about this? Was it only men? Did the men bring their families with them? If men brought their wives, that's 10,000 if every one of them was married. If everyone had a kid, that's 15,000. Some of them had more than we. This could have been a very big number of people. Don't know. But we do know that there was at least 5,000 men there. And that's a big number. That's a big number.
Could they have gotten food from their travels, like how Jesus said not to take anything because you're to receive from your teaching? So maybe even that to show like this is so like your spread of Christianity, hey, like you spread it to these people, they gave you this bread and fish, and now you're going to spread it to all these other people the same way that you spread faith.
Absolutely. That's absolutely it. That's absolutely it.
What we miss about this, I think, is all the opportunities that God set up here. He gave these men the opportunity to go without anything to see how their faith was, but he also gave the opportunity to the people that they went to visit to see if they're going to respond and take care of them like that he expected them to.
There's lots of opportunity been given. That's exactly right. Then he said to his disciples, make them sit down in groups of 50. And they did so and made them all sit down in groups of 50. Can you imagine? Just picture this in your mind for just a minute of, at least 5,000 men plus more sitting down in groups of 50, all sitting down together. To me, that's an amazing mental picture.
But it talks about organization back there.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Organizing.
Yeah. He was organized it all really quick. He did. And that would have been crucial in order to feed this many people. Then he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looked up into heaven. He blessed and broke them and gave them to the disciples to set before the multitude. So they all ate and were filled, and 12 baskets of the leftover fragments were taken up by them. So he took 5 loaves, 2 fish. Do you think this makes you think of from the Old Testament? Just out of curiosity. The manna. Where did the manna come from? Heaven. In the New Testament, don't we read about God reminding people through the writings of the New Testament that, hey, Abraham and Moses and all that, they didn't feed you. God did. God provided manna when you were wondering. It was all God, always feeding you and taking care of you, all the way from Genesis to Malachi. God is taking care of them. In the New Testament, there's a reminder there that.
That's what Jesus about God, and that's why he did it.
Yeah.
So that's what he done.
Yeah. He blessed and broke them and gave them to the disciples to set before the multitude. Why were these people seeing this? Why were the 12 disciples seeing this? Why were the multitudes seeing this? Prove God was in charge. God's power. Should this been a trigger that kicked it in their mind that, hey, this is God? Because I remember the writings of the Old Testament where God fed His people. Should they have remembered that? Should they have known that this was God? The point to the miracles are to prove that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, that He is God on earth. To prove that He is the Messiah. When He was feeding them, they should have realized that it was God feeding them because they should have been taught the things of Scripture where God had done that before. Shouldn't they recognize this as God?
Also, from like a writing standpoint, you had the whole verse where it talked about Herod and how scared he was, and then it gets into this story, which shows like, because we talked about how Herod was more worried about a bigger power than him, and then it shows this story where it is a bigger power.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think this was more of a lesson for the disciples than it was for the crowd. I'm not sure the whole crowd knew exactly what was happening. They saw baskets being delivered. I don't know that they knew that it was a continual miracle as it went around.
They just knew there's food there.
Yeah, that's weird.
So John addresses that a little bit more than Luke does. We'll talk about that in just a second. You're exactly right. So Jesus, and it happened as He was alone praying that His disciples joined Him and He asked them. So the 12 disciples come to Jesus and there Jesus alone praying and He says to them, who do they say I am? Who's a crowd? Who's a multitude? Who's the men say that I am? So it goes right along with what we just said. Was these miracles for the multitude or for the disciples? Or both? Why did Jesus ask this question? Why did Jesus ask this question?
Were they listening?
Were they paying attention? If the disciples did not recognize Jesus as being God, would anyone else? Was it important for Jesus to be recognized by His disciples as God? Who did the crowd say I am, huh?
As I say, I think also like kind of what Barry was saying, like they could have been so consumed by trying to get the people in 50 groups and like trying to get that all together that they were missing the whole point of why they were there.
Yeah. Do we do that? And that's an excellent point. And I want you to think about this for a second. So you've got these 12 disciples here, a multitude of people. They're organizing, making everybody sit down in groups of 50. They all sit down. You know, they're bringing the baskets of food. Jesus is blessing the food. They're serving the food. How easy would it be for them to not realize what's going on? To get so involved in the work that they forget why they're doing it. Do we do that? As Christians, do we do that?
We're thinking of us more than we're thinking of what we're to do, or what we're doing for.
Yeah.
I'm just talking for myself. I'm not throwing anything to anybody else. I'm just talking about for me.
Same way here. And if you go back to the beginning of this, what was their thing? Oh, it's getting late. We need to send them away so they can go get food, so that they can go find a place to sleep. Were they really considering the other people, or were they considering themselves? Why did they want them to go away and find food? Why did they want them to go away and find a place to sleep? So they could find food and find a place to sleep. That's why.
We don't have 2 fish.
Yeah, we only got 2 fish here.
Well, I think we focus on, we're human, and we focus on the tangible.
Uh-huh.
That's exactly what they were.
Yes, they were.
We do that, even like doing something good like PBS, we focus on getting it all ready. That's what we can control.
Yeah.
So that's what we focus on.
That's it.
Jerry, the crowd was crying for this, basically, but had they have dispersed, how many would have never come back?
Well, John gets into that too. We'll go there in a second. Yes.
I know it's easy to look back and kind of judge them why they did this, but actually, there's some symbolism that it's bread and fish, because Jesus is the bread of life. He was born in Bethlehem, which means bread basket. They're thinking there's not enough bread, and there's some message in that for us. He's always enough. He never runs out. He's there for each one of us to full.
Yep, exactly right. So they answered and said, so Jesus asked them, who's the crowd say? They answered Jesus, some say you're John the Baptist, but some say Elijah. What was Herod wanting to know? Who is this? Some say John the Baptist, some say the prophets of old. So, same, John the Baptist, some say Elijah, others say one of the old prophets has risen. But he said to them, but who do you say that I am? And Peter answered, the Christ of God. The Christ of God. John chapter 6 is a very powerful chapter. Same story. Jesus has fed the 5,000. John goes into more detail, talks about some things that are happening there. The disciples are following after Jesus. And Jesus tells them, he's like, look, if you don't eat my flesh, if you don't drink my blood, you can have no part of me. And they are kind of set back and shocked and like, we don't understand what you're saying. How can we eat your flesh? How can we drink your blood? This is hard for us to understand. And John chapter 6 in verse number 66 says, many turned away. Many turned away because they didn't understand. Simply because they did not understand something, they quit following after Jesus. Jesus had pointed out to them, you're following me because you want your stomachs filled. You're following me because of physical things, but your focus needs to be on spiritual things. And they didn't understand all this, so they just quit. And John goes into a little more detail and he says to them, to his disciples, who do men say that I am? And they respond likewise. And he says, but who do you say that I am? Do you remember? Do you remember what John says Peter said? You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Same thing, the Christ of God. Different writer, different detail. Why was this so important? Why is it so important now? What do we see? What do we see? Do we see the physical things? Do we see reasons to turn people away? Do we get so caught up in the things we're doing we forget why we're doing them? Do we forget that Jesus is the Christ, that He is the Son of the living God, that He is the Messiah, that He is God on earth, and that He has risen? Do we forget that there are lost souls out there that need Him? Do we forget that? Are we willing, just because we're getting tired, to turn people away? Yes.
Herod heard all these things that they're saying right there. Herod heard it. Well, these disciples heard these things. And they're out among these people, and a lot of these people are having trouble, and they're going, well, this is John the Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
This is so they're having trouble believing. Well, we listen to the world today.
Yes.
That's what happens today. We listen to the world.
We listen to the world.
To the book.
Yep, that's exactly right. Interesting statement right here. I want your thoughts on this. Why? After Jesus was correctly identified by Peter as being the Christ, why did Jesus tell them not to tell anybody that? Because He wants. So you got your own salvation with fear and trembling. Well, now they were going to go out into the world and spread the gospel and tell everybody this. So why didn't they want it? Why didn't He want it at this time? It wasn't time yet. So there's another lesson in this. You remember I said before, I said the first thing, if I were to open up a preaching school, the very first thing I would teach people is this. Is number one, to shake the dust off your feet. We have to be willing as Christians when we go into the world and spread the gospel. If people reject us, we have to realize they're rejecting God and we have to go forward. What was the second thing I said? Y'all remember? Take time alone. I want y'all to know, my wife listens to me. And I'll pay for that later. So, take time alone in prayer with God. The third thing that I want you to notice, if I were to open up a preaching school teaching people to spread the gospel, is right here. You have to understand that God works on His own time frame, not ours. We talked about sowing seed. You go sow seed, you don't wait for it to come up, right? We talked about that. It may come up in a month from now. It may come up a year from now. You sow the seed. That's the job. Let God work in His time. My dad, perfect example of that. He didn't obey when I wanted him to obey, but he obeyed when God knew he would. You have to let God work in His time, and that is so hard to do. He strictly warned and commanded them to tell this to no one, saying, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed and be raised the third day. Do you think they understood what He just said to them at this point? I doubt it. In fact, Jesus told them time and time again that He was going to die, and they just didn't quite get it. Then He said to them all, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. Fourth thing that I would tell somebody if I were starting a preaching school is preaching is not a one-day event. And preaching is not only done by the preacher. Christians, if you are a disciple of Christ, you should be taking up the cross of Christ on a daily basis. Daily. What does it mean to take up the cross of Christ? What does it mean to deny yourself? What does that mean? What does it mean to you?
What I say and do, people watch.
Yeah, what you...
Whether or not you think they are.
Yeah, people are watching.
Do His will and not do mine.
Do His will and not do mine. Exactly right. Exactly right. Both of those are exactly right. People are watching. Hey.
That you don't expect to happen. I was at a place this past week, and the person, the proprietor of the store said, well, those people out of the other congregation out Willette, there's 39, 40 of them sick with the virus, is what I hear. Is what the man said. I just went ahead and got whatever was getting and walked out. I thought, well, now there's an opportunity. The man mentioned church, and the man is not a Christian. But I just turned around and went back in there. Now, that's the things that we have to be on watch for, is those little openings when we find them.
Yes.
And sometimes we're too busy. I was busy wrapped up in what I was doing, because I just ran out. And then happened to think for one time to run back in.
Yeah, and that's a good way to summarize this entire thing that we're looking at. Do you think those 12 disciples there were focused on them and the things they needed to do and didn't realize that there was a whole multitude of people trying to find Jesus there? Same thing. It's so easy to do.
I also think, like, in this, He's also saying, like, when we fall or when we fall short of being how, as Christian leaders, we should, like, to pick it up again. Like, we need to pick the cross up again. Because there's a lot of people that don't. They just leave it there. In a metaphorical sense.
Exactly right.
When Jesus said, let him deny himself, we have to think about the things that we feel are important.
That's right.
That we think.
That's right.
We have to-
It's not about what I think or feel. It's about what He says. And that's really hard. It's really, really hard. And as I grow as a Christian, the things I think and feel will align with what He says. For whoever desire, we'll start here next week. We're out of time. Thank y'all.